All right, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our topic of discussion today: 4 steps to build your academic technology strategy around Zoom. My name's Mike Lavelle. I'm head of marketing at Class EDU, and I'll be kicking off the webinar here today. Just going through some logistics before I pass it off to our presenters. Our agenda today looks like this. We'll go through some introductions. Spencer and Kevin will take care of that on their end. And then we'll do a quick view into Class for Zoom and what we're building here at Class EDU. We'll then jump into the heart of the discussion today, which is about how academic technologists and educators can actually build their technology strategy, their academic technology strategy around Zoom. Kevin is joining us from Utah State University, where he'll share some of his insights and observations as he's been working on this very topic over the last several months. We'll also have Q&A and time for that at the end. Put your questions in the chat window. We're going to be compiling them throughout. And if we can't get to your questions at the end, we'll certainly be following up to answer those questions with you one-on-one and make sure that we address all of those. So without further ado, let's get to introductions, and I'll turn it over to Kevin first to tell us a little bit about himself and what brings him here today. Kevin?
You bet. Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. Kevin Reeve here from Utah State University. One of my main jobs is to listen to faculty and find out what their challenges are, and also what are they trying to accomplish in the classroom or online, or using a technology such as Zoom, and then help them accomplish that. And that includes either building something or finding a tool to help them. So that's the fun part of the job that I have.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. My name is Spencer. Pleasure to be with you all. I'm the Vice President of Services here at Class EDU. I'm more of a technical person. My background is in educational technology. I've been doing educational technology work for about 20 years. I used to work in higher education, specifically at Brigham Young University. But I've also worked at Blackboard, at Instructure Canvas, even at Moodle Room. So I'm very heavily steeped in the LMS world. And now I'm working here at Class EDU, helping with technical implementations, getting this working at client sites, working heavily with our strategic beta partners. Utah State University is one of our strategic beta partners. And it's been a pleasure to work with Kevin. And thank you very much, Kevin, for agreeing to be on this webinar with us today.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. So Kevin, why don't we go ahead and get started? The format for today's webinar is we wanted to talk a little bit about Zoom and how to leverage it inside the classroom, and what are how it can be used, and talk a little bit about who we are at Class for Zoom and why at Class EDU we decided to do what we're doing. In 2020 has been an interesting year for all of us in education, right? Zoom very quickly shifted from a nice to have to really something that everyone is using. It almost went to a 100% adoption. I think the stats has gone almost to 97% adoption across the board in both K-12 and in higher education. Just about everyone is leveraging Zoom in one way or another to facilitate education. And that's whether you're doing traditional classes, you have a couple of students who for whatever reason can't make it into the classroom, or schools who've had to completely shut down and go 100% remote, or some variant in between in that spectrum. You're leveraging some type of technology. In most cases, it is Zoom to facilitate the conducting of day-to-day classes. And so what we've done at Class for Zoom is we've taken the Zoom SDK and we've actually layered in a service layer, and we actually built teaching and learning tools directly into that environment. And we've actually been able to launch assessments, launch polls, launch tools synchronously. Things that are usually relegated to like a asynchronous LMS experience can now be done synchronously in changing the way in which classes can be conducted in the Zoom environment. And then also we've included class management tools that have made it much easier to conduct a class from the mechanics and the logistics of taking attendance and verifying that students are actually who they say they are. We've enhanced privacy for students. And so we've layered all that in to really make Zoom work for teachers. And so that's what Class for Zoom is as a product and what we've tried to do at Class for Zoom. So we wanted to take a step back though, and really talk about what a Zoom strategy can be and really what the 4 pillars are around how you can use Zoom in your teaching and learning efforts or at your institution, and what steps you can take to be successful with Zoom in your instruction. And so step 1 is identifying the learning gaps in online environments. And so we want to start with this data point and this graph that came from an Inside Higher Ed article from October of this year. And in here is some data that was surveying online educators from May and then again in August. And in here, it was checking data points from, talking about engagement in the classroom, the importance of providing timely feedback for students, ensuring accessibility for students, redesigning the course around online delivery, increasing student collaboration. And you see here across the board, teachers are getting much more comfortable with online engagement, online teaching in general. But the number one thing of the highest importance was that it was all revolving around principally around engagement in the classroom. And so you can see here that of all these things that were priorities for teachers in online education, anchoring on how to get students more engaged in their online class was the number one thing that was most important.
And
And so
Spencer,
as
I
you
can
look at,
concur.
oh, sure, jump in, Kevin.
Sorry about that. As I look at that, I can concur that at Utah State University, as we've talked with students, those very same things on that chart are also challenges and concerns for them, things that they've wanted to see or have, especially engaging, more engagement with the instructor, more timely feedback, and also engaging with their fellow classmates like they are able to do when they're in the face-to-face class.
Exactly. That's right. And so, when you talk about that transition from the face-to-face classroom to the online classroom, there's a lot of things that are lost in that transition. And so a lot of times as technologists, we focus on the tool set, right? So here we have things that instantly go missing in the tool set from the physical classroom to when you try and do something exclusively through a tool like Zoom. Well, we say, oh, well, you missed like these one-to-one discussions. You missed like the ability to hand in an assignment through Zoom. You missed the ability to have a grade book. All of a sudden, in a class EDU, we did this study, and it's like, oh, well, 60% are missing. But we also miss a lot of the informal, organic components to education, where really some of the real social engagements, where real gems of education happen. And when I'm talking about are like those moments before a class starts or after class stops, or those moments when you run into a student in the hallway and they ask you this informal question. And it's those organic moments that a lot of students and teachers are saying that they're really starting to feel the missing moments. And so it's not so much of trying to figure out, well, from a tool perspective, how do we replace all the missing features, so to speak, but how can we deploy these tools in a way in which we can recapture these organic moments and create an environment in which we can facilitate these organic interactions to where we can start having these organic educational or learning moments. And so it's a really interesting problem. How can we maintain not just the tool set and the features, but the social experience and the social dynamic? And so, Kevin, again, to kind of to ask you a question here, where does student engagement fall for you, or where are some of the gaps in the learning environments that you've seen evolve over 2020 as USU has kind of dealt with the COVID pandemic?
Sure. And I think you just answered some of that question there, Spencer. One is, that informal student engagement with the instructor. Before class, after class, students are really appreciate the opportunity to not have to sign up for an office hours or be able to just visit with the instructor, ask a simple question that's on their mind, and not make it such a formal thing. Also, being able to learning from each other is important. We've known that for years, that not only do students learn from the instructor, but they learn from each other and they enjoy the interaction. And, this whole pandemic thing has kind of put everybody in silos, isolated, and the same opportunities have not been there for students to seek out their fellow classmates and have opportunities to learn from each other, to be taught from each other, and learn from the experience of others. So I think that's an important. The timely feedback, instructors being able to get feedback on assessments or knowledge or learning is also something that is on students' mind as well.
Sure, that's interesting insight. So what strategies has USU taken to provide students with opportunities to interact with each other more in a virtual context? That's obviously something that fits outside of the traditional lecture structure, that you almost kind of have to plan for those types of activities. It's planning for an organic opportunity almost.
Yeah. So one thing that at Utah State University, when we purchased Zoom, all students have a license as well to be hosts of meetings, and so they can host a meeting, and because they can. At least in a Zoom class, if it's happening, or even in an online setting or a hybrid where they're doing both, they can at least let students know about what's going on, and find ways to invite them, and have their own informal learning. We're also looking at and visiting with student leaders about this, and trying to fully understand what students would like here, and look for opportunities to find things that can help students in that way. So we haven't figured it all out. We've got a few things that are available to them now, but we're still looking to the best way to proceed with that.
Oh, excellent. So with students having their own accounts and the ability to schedule their own Zoom meetings, do you see the formation of ad hoc study groups? Do students kind of collate and form their own little study groups and clubs, or is that still pretty much a instructor-led activity?
For the most part, students have taken that on themselves. I usually, let's talk about a face-to-face class, right? You in there, you see students, you may see one or two, or more if you're in a specific program. Sometimes those happen informally when you're just leaving class. Class is over, and you walk out in the hall and you say, "Hey, is there a study group?" Or two or three people may be getting together. But students are very creative in their ways that they make that happen, but they've missed that opportunity to really connect with the students, to make those happen quicker.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before moving on, any other gaps in the learning environments that you've seen evolved in 2020 before we move on?
No, not that. I think that covers the majority of them.
Excellent. Okay. So moving on, now we have step 2. So considerations for improving educator adoption of Zoom. So what we wanted to talk about here, or how I took this pillar, was an anecdotal story that I want to talk about a real person. And this person's name is, I changed his identity to protect him because he's a real person. He's one of my best friends, but this is Dan. And Dan is a very intelligent person. He's a tenured law professor. And to give you a sense of how smart he was a valedictorian at an Ivy Law School. He's one of these people who you see on the news channels. He's a pundit. He's always called in to talk on different aspects of the law and culture. And for 20 years, I've been trying to get him to adopt some form of educational technology. I used to work at Blackboard. I used to work at Canvas. I was always like, hey, you should put your contract law course in Canvas or in Blackboard. And he's like, no, I feed off of the tears of my law students. I don't need to make life easy for them. I think we all know these types of professors. Like, a very big believer in the Socratic method, very big believer in and striking fear into the hearts of his law students. And we chuckle about it, but really a great guy, very intelligent. Well, this year hit him very hard because his law school shut down and he was told that he needed to teach all of his classes 100% online. And he called me up. He had my cell phone because, like I said, we're personal friends. He called me up in a panic and he said, I was told by my dean I had to teach my class 100% on Zoom. What do I do? And I was like, well, first off, Dan, I told you so. Like, you needed to be doing this years ago. And he's like, well, give me some advice. I have a week or two to kind of put things together. What should I do? And so I'll share with you the advice that I gave to him. And then I think Kevin, I wanted to open this up with a little bit of a conversation. But this is the advice I gave to him. So it's really the 4 Fs, well, 3 Fs and an S. But one, keep it familiar, keep it flexible, and keep it fun. So first off, what makes you a good teacher traditionally will make you a good teacher online. Now, it's not going to make you, I mean, there are best practices that will make you a good teacher online, and there are always best practices and way to improve, but it doesn't necessarily need to be something radically different. Sometimes you feel like people feel like they need to do something radically different in order to teach online, and that's not necessarily the case. And they in the attempt to do something radically different, they just end up disrupting themselves, and it ends up becoming like a false start or overly complicated. And so the first thing is if you're transitioning, especially midstream, is if you do a check on learning or if you do a pop quiz before every single lecture, do the pop quiz before every single lecture. Maintain as much of the format as possible and maintain that flow and that rhythm, because that's those patterns and those flows are things that are going to give stability to the learners and keep things moving in the right direction. Second off, keep things very flexible. And I mean that because as unsettled and as anxious as my professor friend was, students are going through those same feelings and sentiments. Just like the professor was stressed out and was anxious, the students are going through the exact same transitions. Many of them are losing their residency. They can't actually show up and they have to live at home. Sometimes it's not a very conducive environment for learning. Sometimes they don't have the great connection to the internet at home. Sometimes they don't have a quiet place to listen to the lecture. Their internet goes down and they can't submit the lesson. So putting in very intricate due dates and really, over engineering your course sometimes makes that really too cumbersome and hard to kind of roll with the natural ebb and flow that life sometimes take. And so if you can be flexible with due dates, have grace periods, keep things just flexible and flowing as possible is the best practice. And also, teaching online can be fun. Keep things conversational, keep things organic, have icebreakers, schedule in time to have fun with the students online, and bring a part of yourself to the lecture. I think that that's something that makes teachers and instructors fun in traditional settings, but that can also come out within the online Zoom environment as well. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing type of a situation. So you can incorporate things like Kahoot, or you can have a poll where you can actually solicit information from students, and you can be dynamic, or you can share a little funny anecdotes with the class, and it kind of gets the anxiety and jitters out at the beginning, and then everyone can kind of ease and break the tension and get into the materials. So that's kind of the story of Dan. That's the counsel I gave with him. He found it very useful, and today he is still teaching his classes online because his university hasn't opened back up. So the question, Kevin, I wanted to pose to you, and I didn't know if you had any anecdotes that you wanted to share with about Dan or whatnot, but what strategies would you give to educational technologists or instructional support specialists in working with faculty members or technology laggards, or those who've really been resistant to adopting educational technology, who are now, because of the pandemic, been kind of forced into the situation with Zoom?
Yeah, have had lots of experience over the years, and especially during the pandemic, but even early on as we started moving from overhead projectors to PowerPoint type things in the classroom. The number one thing that I have learned in working with faculty is, first of all, listen. Listen, those laggards, listen to them and understand why or the reasons they are hesitant or fearful or really not wanting to adopt technology and change the way. Like in the example that you gave, Spencer, I've met several faculty who love to perform in the classroom. They love it. They like to see the feedback of the students in their faces, in the way they react. Um, and so listening, I think, and understanding where they're coming from is one of the most important things. And then I think number two is offer to help. Uh, you need to just say, "Hey, I'll help you," and figure out where you can help. And then the last one is, it's part of offering to help. It's offer to be there. As we moved into the pandemic mode, we had many conversations about how are we going to help faculty, whether they're moving online, they're moving to a Zoom type web-based conferencing system or a hyperflex model. Uh, how can we best help? And we elicited the help of our entire staff and even students who worked for us to be there and be available to help these faculty. I had a faculty who had to do a webinar, and this faculty member was pretty nervous about doing it. It was going to be a couple of hundred people. It wasn't an academic setting, it was with peers across the country for the research in which they were doing. And they were going to be the presenter and the host. And I just said, how about if one of my team, our team, is there with you and can help you through that? And so one of my team members did that, and I got a nice email from that faculty member who said, "Thank you. It went better than I expected, and it was so good to have uh, the staff member there who could just help make sure everything went smooth for me." So once they get comfortable and do it a couple of times, they're off to the races for the most part, and many of them will adopt it and run with it, and they'll become great advocates for the technology. I have seen that. Some of the later adopters, or those with fears or concerns about moving that way because they were comfortable where they are, were have become some of the greatest advocates for doing this.
No, that's great. I really like that. It seems like a very nurturing approach that you took with, you know, empathetically listening to them and then offering to help them and just offering to be there with them. Zoom is not a complicated tool. I mean, obviously, there's complaints around usability and, is it intended for one purpose or another purpose? But ultimately, like what you said, if you can just get them over the hurdle of using it a couple of times and get them comfortable with it, you're right. There is a lot that can be done with it. And so I really like that approach.
For faculty who are teaching, are going to jump into it for teaching for the first time, helping them understand the ability to set expectations. Oftentimes, and we heard this, right? I was on Facebook with many parents who were very frustrated that first day their K through 12 kids had to get on the technology, right? And things didn't work, and parents are trying to figure it out, the teachers trying to figure it out, the kids are trying to figure out. Well, it doesn't matter if it's K through 12 or university graduate level courses. That first time you use the technology, and this is what early on when we started doing web-based conferencing courses with technology that's not even around anymore, um, we would help instructors understand that first time needs to be flexible. And that's the time where people are going to get on. They're going to have technical challenges. You may have some technical challenges. Use it as a time to get connected, meet the people, work through the issues, and be flexible that first time. Once you're successful and get everybody connected, then the learning can happen, and you can make up that time in subsequent sessions. So being flexible and setting expectations for that first time, I think, is important.
Oh, absolutely. And as you're just saying that, Kevin, it reminded me of a story that I heard just today. I was meeting with the dean at a university, and just today she was telling me a story about keeping it familiar and flexible. She was teaching an online class via Zoom, and up until then, she was always keeping the camera on herself. And then one day, she just didn't feel like keeping the camera on herself. And she read a study that said no one watches the camera anyway. It doesn't make a difference on instruction. And so she just pointed her camera at the brick wall. And then everyone started freaking out. And in chat said, is something broken? Am I in the right spot? We can't see you. That started creating all this confusion. And so she immediately put the camera back on herself. And everyone's like, oh, okay, we see you. We know we're in the right spot. And so it's just this idea of sometimes we set this expectation and we try new things and it doesn't work out. And sometimes things do work out. And it's just this idea of being willing to try new things. But, you know, if they don't work out, being willing to pivot back and just keeping things flexible, but always trying to keep things, you know, recognizable and familiar to what people are used to. Excellent. Well, thank you. Let's move on now to to this next topic that we have here. Called How Do We Enhance Zoom as a Teaching and Learning Tool? And we've kind of danced around this topic a little bit so far, but now I want to just kind of like dive right into it, because one of the #1 complaints I've heard from educators and ed tech professionals is that Zoom is not a teaching and learning tool. Zoom is designed for the workplace. It's to have work meetings, business meetings, and it's just painful in an education setting. And there are some valid critiques there, but I would come back and say that there are some valid strategies and best practices to use Zoom as a teaching and learning tool in its own right. And so I wanted to go through some of those right here and now. And so first off, Zoom can be more than just the stage. Like you said, teachers like to perform, they like having the instant feedback. And so a lot of teachers will just turn on Zoom and say, this is my stage where I perform. But if you do more than that, if you dive a little bit deeper, you can use it as a teaching and learning tool. First and foremost is you can bring students to the front of the class by encouraging them to share, by having them share their video, by having them share their desktop, by sharing their application. So one of the things that you can do is, you know, whether you have activities and they can, if they can get to either have breakout rooms and they can work on something together, and then they can present to the rest of the class and share what they've created by you can put them, quote unquote, into the front of the class. Or you can have them share their video, and whether they're reading, if you're reading as a class, you can have their video on and they can take over the instructor role for a bit. That puts us, gives them the ability to have kind of that center stage experience. Another way in which they can, you can encourage sharing, and another way, it's almost like an access to technology or an equity in technology access, is there's always this level setting problem with with content authoring. And what I mean by that is like, you know, some people have Microsoft Office, some people have the Mac OS authoring tools. They have Pages and Keynote. And when they build content, like some people can't read it, or you have to publish everything to PDF, and formatting always becomes a problem. Well, if someone wants to build content out really quickly and share it, in Zoom, it's great, because what they could do is they could spend 20 minutes building content in class. And then when they share their application, they're just sharing it over Zoom. And now instantly everyone can see the content because it's just being shared over Zoom. And so all of a sudden now all of that becomes not an issue. The chat tool. The chat tool in Zoom can be a little cumbersome, but you can leverage the chat tool because learners who maybe don't feel comfortable with audio, you can reach them more directly by using the chat tool. And so use the chat tool, encourage its use, promote its use with chat. Also, if there's chat activity that you don't get to in class, you can use the unaddressed chat activity as seed material, either for a future lecture or for your LMS discussion boards. And so let's say there's a bunch of comments that or discussion in the chat board that you weren't able to address in your class. Well, take that and make it discussion board posts and say, hey, we didn't get to this in class, but use this in your use this to further the conversation in the Canvas or Blackboard discussion boards. And then lastly, whiteboards. Zoom has one. I know it's a little hidden and hard to get to, but I'm a big fan of the Zoom whiteboard. And what I like to do is I have lesson plans when I teach, and I actually like putting my lesson plan up on the whiteboard while I'm teaching, and I'll actually annotate it while I'm teaching. And so if there's an insightful comment or if there's a question from the class, I'll actually type out the question on the whiteboard. And then as comments come in or as we have a class discussion, I'll actually type out the comments interactively on the whiteboard. And students have come back and said that that was really helpful. Why? Because I'm incorporating more of their senses into the class conversation. They're not just hearing it, but they're also seeing it. And so the retention rates are often much higher when you adopt those types of practices. But what's also nice with Zoom is you don't have to use the Zoom whiteboard if you don't want to. You can also use third-party whiteboards like Miro, and there's other ones out there, and you can just share your desktop while you're using that application. But so it's really nice though, is that you can, like I said, use your lecture notes or class notes or the syllabus or bring in documents, images, and you can annotate them. And that annotation feature or allowing other students to come in and annotate them while you're lecturing really enriches the experience. Then if you want to take this whole experience of using Zoom as a teaching and learning tool to the next level, that's what we do at Class for Zoom. We really bring this at the next level by embedding these teaching and learning tools directly into the Zoom environment. And if I don't know if any of you in the webinar have gotten a chance to go to our website and see our video or see some of our presentations, but we have the ability to take this to a much deeper level where we have things like having assessments and quizzes embedded directly into Zoom, or we can actually have polls, live polls and live assignments all submitted directly within Zoom. Videos, launching a video, and like if you ever tried to share a video over Zoom, you know the pain point where it's laggy for people because you're sharing it over application sharing. Well, in Class for Zoom, we actually have a video tool where it plays natively for everyone in the class, but we actually retain instructor playback controls. And so if you want to take the teaching and learning to the next level, I'd invite you all to investigate Class for Zoom, because like I said, we really take this whole concept of teaching and learning tools to the next level in Class for Zoom. So Kevin, I wanted to pause here and throw a question to you here about what are some of the interesting teaching and learning use cases you've seen in Zoom over the last year at USU?
Hey, I had an instructor call me up. They're teaching dance via Zoom. How's that?
Oh,
Dance
that's cool. How are they doing that?
Yeah, that was pretty cool, and we worked on some ideas to enhance that. One of the things that I have seen um, work very well, and I even saw this before the pandemic. It works well in some classes, and it really depends on the content. Is that chat back channel? I've seen this work very, very well in graduate level classes and upper division classes where the teacher may be talking or a student may be given a presentation, and there's an entire other conversation going on in chat. It's a back channel, and I just saw on our chat, Ed mentioned about saving the chat. That happens because it will contain valuable information in the chat, and you want to be able to save that after class, so to review. So I've seen that work very, very well, where people are able, just like's happening today, people are giving their shared experience in the chat as we're doing this webinar, Spencer, and people can learn. We're learning from each other. They're just not learning from you and I, and they have great experiences to share as well. So I think that's something that I've seen really take off. The other thing is, as I have worked with faculty, is pausing. Right. I saw another thing in the chat about, let's not be doing a 3-hour lecture in Zoom, and I agree. But things that we can do, and especially with this pandemic, is the instructor doesn't need to take the full time. As we've worked with instructors, and I'm not promoting this book, but I'll show it, Hitting Pause, right?
Right.
As you look at active learning in the classroom, the physical classroom, most of these things can be done in Zoom. I think of one of the activities that's quite popular, a think, pair, share. Instructor poses a question, pauses, and gives time for students individually to think about it. Okay. So puts the now thinking process on the student and then teams them up with another person or maybe 3 people total, put them in a breakout group and have them share with each other what they thought about that question, and they will learn from each other. And then if time permits, you can bring them all back together and ask and call on people and ask them to share what they learned and what they talked about. Those are great teaching moments that break up a class, and they carry across to Zoom very, very well. You can do it. And from what I've seen in class for Zoom, um, it facilitates this just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's like one of those things where, what makes a good teacher or good teaching isn't exclusive to, online or offline. It's those things that can be done in an analog fashion can definitely be done online. And no one wants to sit and just be talked at for an hour straight, but provide time for introspection and reflection uh, is something that Zoom could do very nicely. Excellent. So I wanted to pivot for just a second here and talk about Class for Zoom with you. USU is participating in the strategic beta program. And so I just wanted to ask, what attracted you and USU to Class for Zoom from a teaching and learning perspective and your participation in the strategic beta program?
So the first thing that a couple of us, when we first heard about it, and it wasn't through educational channels, right? It was a news article about the company and the tool. Was that screen you see right there on the laptop on this slide, right? That's what caught our attention early on before we'd even had a demo of the product. It looked to us like a classroom, and ever since we've been using tools like just Zoom, we've said these are great tools that can be used in education, but they're missing some features that would make classroom presentation, uh, have teaching tools and also class management tools that could make it a better tool for teaching versus just having a meeting. And when we first saw Class for Zoom and learned of the teaching tools and the class management tools, it just resonated. And we said, yes, this rings true with us. It rings true with what our faculty would like to have, and we would like to check it out and kick the tires per se, right? And we like what we see.
Oh, excellent. Very cool. Well, in the interest of time, I think we should move on to the last pillar. And this is one that talks about institutional rollout strategy. And so, Kevin, this is one where I wanted to ask you the question pretty early on. So I don't want to get too caught up into what I have to say. But on this slide, you can see here, we labeled it traditional considerations for institutional rollout. And these 6 bullet points are the things that we are, what we typically tend to think about when we want to bring a new piece of technology into an institutional environment, whether it's a new LMS or if it's a new discussion board or if it's a new portal. We say, hey, where's the gap or where's the need? Who are the stakeholders? How, where's the selection committee? Where's the budget? And we start planning and we start putting it all together. My question is how has this been disrupted over the last year? Because I think a lot of institutions, in trying to respond to the needs of the pandemic, have had to just get into a mode of reacting and had to get into a mode of moving quickly to respond. A lot of priorities have had to shift on a dime, and a lot of decisions have had to, and I think we're still kind of in that mode. I think, we had the first order problems of the academic continuity, of solving the problems of academic continuity. Now we're probably in second order problems, but we're still kind of dealing with those second and third order problems. So does this, I guess my question is what's happening now, in 2021 and beyond? Do we kind of revert back to this traditional model, or do you think that there's kind of a new normal, to use that term, or is there going to be kind of a hybrid of considerations? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that we've been talking about here at USU. I got a list of all the instructors before the start of spring semester, so they had to respond back by the end of October before registration happened. How are you planning to teach your class spring semester, right? And so they had to say whether it was going to be a hyperflex kind of model where some students are in the class and some are on Zoom, or if it's all on Zoom, or if it's going fully online. And I received a list of all of those who are going to be teaching classes by Zoom, and it's close to 800 courses will be taught spring semester via
Oh,
Zoom.
wow.
Okay, yeah, and before that, before this happened, I guarantee it wasn't even close to that, right? We probably had we had a couple of dozen classes, programs that went out via web conferencing, and we used another high definition technology from campus to campus to teach courses, a little over 300 a semester. In our distance ed program. So we can see that a lot of faculty have jumped on this. They obviously use the LMS as well. Before the pandemic, 80% of our more than 80% of our undergraduate classes had some presence in the LMS. But we also had faculty who had not been using the LMS or had been using web conferencing, so they were thrown in. And our teams just did everything we could to support them, to listen to them, to find out what they were trying to accomplish, help them be successful as we could, and be there for them. So where does it go, once this pandemic is over? Are we going back exactly the way we were? I don't see that. But are we going to be totally online or totally Zoom? I don't see that either. I see a hybrid type thing. Faculty who would have never thought about teaching with Zoom have now found out that, hey, this works. And beyond their classes, right? They're in faculty meetings, they're in committee meetings, they're interacting with students using the tool. Some of them may say, hey, this is a great tool for me to use, and I can teach with it, but I can also use it in a hybrid model. We may say, hey, classroom space on campus is at a premium. We did an experiment. It actually worked. We were able to adapt. Students were able to connect. Maybe we will meet twice a week, and that third meeting during the week will be in a synchronous type, using a tool like Zoom, and that. So I see us moving forward with these kinds of tools. Faculty have embraced them, and I see it not going fully online, but for some programs and those who had never done it before, definitely jumping on and using it more than they ever would have thought of pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. From what I hear you saying, it's sounding like you've made believers out of people who are either skeptics or just never were forced to explore these types of issues before. And then also in the name of convenience and also in the name of readiness, this is just more of an emphasis are going to be made on having hybrid type solutions ongoing, so that if a disruption comes, everyone's ready for it, and that a quick reaction won't be as disruptive as it has been in the past. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate your time. I think you've given us some tremendous insight. The experience at USU is an interesting case. I really appreciate your time and being with us today. I'm going to go ahead and progress here. Again, Mike, I guess I'll turn the time over to you to end out the webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So for those that want more information, we've got a lot of really great questions in the chat. You can request early access for Class for Zoom by heading to the URL on the screen. It's just classforzoom.com. But we have some good time now at the end of the webinar just to go over a couple questions that have gone through the chat, answer those. And I'll pose those to Kevin and Spencer respectively, and we'll just get through a few of these questions. The first one is really around this idea of Zoom fatigue. So I thought I would start with you, Kevin, on that one. But what have you been doing? What kind of resources have you been providing as you work to support educators in this moment where all of us are feeling it? We're staring into these screens more often. The screen time on our iPhones at the end of the week is 30 or 40% higher than we've had in non-traditional times and traditional times, I should say. What have you done at Utah State University to help combat this?
Yeah, encourage instructors to break it up, right? And do some things synchronously and do some things asynchronously. I think if you ask students what they like, and if you look at studies from EDUCAUSE on students in information technology, they like a hybrid approach, and they don't like learning 100% online. But they do love interaction. They love to learn from their instructor. They love their instructor to teach them. They love to see other students who are learning. They love to engage them. And so I think the bottom line is just break it up, figure ways so it's not just one person doing all the talking.
Awesome.
And
perfect.
I'll jump in on that
Go
one
ahead,
too.
Spencer.
And I would say keep it fun. Like I mean, I know it's not a teacher's job to entertain it. I mean, sometimes material is material, but I took organic chemistry in college. It's a very tough class. It's a very hard class. And I had a teacher who would dress up as molecules and show up just because they enjoyed dressing up as molecules, as silly as that sounds. And it kept us engaged. And so if you search the headlines, you'll find both K-12 and university professors, tenured professors, doing fun, interesting things over Zoom to keep learners engaged. And you don't need to do it. You don't need to go overboard. You don't need to dress in a different Halloween costume every Zoom session. But there are small little things that you can do to keep learners engaged, and you can have little surveys and little pop quizzes and bring your passion for what you're teaching into the Zoom environment. And that passion comes across to your learners and keeps people engaged.
Awesome. Thank you both. There's a question here I'll just put out there to either of you who want to pick it up. It's similar but different to what we just talked about. It's really about this idea of how to ensure a better quality of instruction with Zoom and just synchronous class instruction, in general. So it's a focus on quality of instruction. What have you all seen, maybe starting with you, Kevin, that really helps specific to Zoom as being the tool that's at the center of that instruction?
Yeah, this might seem a little weird because it really doesn't have to do with totally instructions, but it's figure out a way to connect with your students. One of the professors that I've had the opportunity to work with, I attended a training she did at one of our conferences that we have on campus, and she finds a way during the first few weeks to have a one-on-one with each student. Now that's time consuming, right? She makes time, carves it out on her calendar. They can sign up, and she has a Zoom with a student to do that connection one-on-one. And once that connection is made, the instructional part and the rest of the time where there's one to many, many students to one instructor, I think that really helps. And those students feel that they matter. I think that's one thing. It may be a little off the norm, but I've really appreciated that. And I've actually tried to now incorporate that into the class that I teach.
Awesome. There were some questions about Class for Zoom and LMS and LTI kind of integration. Spencer, maybe you can take that one. Just tell us a little bit about how this integrates with LMS and LTI and so on, and just how that works.
Sure, no, absolutely. We're currently, we're in development of an LTI tool for Class for Zoom. So we're scheduling general availability in Q1 of next year, and with that will come an LTI tool. So if your LMS supports LTI, it'll add a course navigation link. So from within the course menu, your faculty, your instructor, your students will be able to launch into Class for Zoom, and there'll be a single sign-on step, and they'll be able to navigate from within their LMS course and Class for Zoom sessions. And so it handles the single sign-on, the roles and permissioning, and all that great stuff.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'm just scanning our questions here and seeing if there's another one or two that we might take. There's a couple about the future of online education with coming out of the pandemic and so on. I think we've nailed those ones. Awesome. I think we're coming up on time here, guys and gals. So want to thank everyone for attending today, those that were able to attend live. And for those that are listening to the recording, thank you for your interest as well. I also want to thank Kevin Reeve for his time and really great insights today. So thank you, Kevin, and also thank you, Spencer, as well. We'll follow up with the recording. We'll follow up with the slides and get to any questions that we might have missed. But thank you so much to you all. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons and days, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
See you all.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.